I'm Madison Timmons.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And we're the co-creators of the hit podcast, The Most Haunted City on Earth.
Look, we love ghosts, but we also love true crime. So we here at Haunted City Studios decided to create From One to Wicked.
A true crime podcast with a killer twist. We'll investigate,
discuss,
then rate
the most brutal and devious crimes and the monsters who commit them.
On a scale from 1 to wicked. So sit back and kill some time with us.
And remember, next time you're walking down the street,
you might just be passing a perfect Wicked 10. Hello and welcome back to another episode of From One to Wicked. My name is Madison Timmons.
My name is JT Timmons.
And today we are going to be doing the notorious Night Stalker.
Oh boy.
Old Richard Ramirez.
Y'all asked for it.
Yeah, everybody loves the Night Stalker case, you know? I think there's just something fascinating about him because he's just such a character in himself.
He's a character, all right.
And he accomplished so much as a killer in such a short span of time, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, he's one of the most notorious serial killers of all time for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, and it's not even that he was just a serial killer. That's what makes him so terrifying. Right. He did so many crimes.
Exactly.
He's like, I'm going to do all the crimes.
I'm going to do it all.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. So that's who we're going to be ranking today. If you are new here, well, first off, welcome. But for this show, we do the things a little bit differently because we are rating these killers and different crimes on a scale of from 1 to wicked. And the way we are accomplishing that is through 5 different categories, which include brutality, premeditation, difficulty of investigation, motive, and body count.
Yep.
And so this is also interactive. So as you are listening through this, kind of keep a note of things that you feel like might add into your final total. And then at the end of things, comment down below if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube and tell us what you would rank Richard Ramirez as.
Yep.
Yeah. And we've had some pretty high rankers. I don't know how well he's going to hold up against people like Samuel Little. But
really?
Yeah.
See, I thought that he would compete with Samuel Little significantly.
I guess.
Samuel Little, evil dude, but I don't know. I feel like Richard Ramirez tops him on some things.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's just like Samuel Little. He's the only 10 we've had for body count. So,
yeah, that's true.
And I think that is what pulls down a lot of these cases.
It's true.
Is the body count aspect.
True.
But anywho, let's go ahead and get into this.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're starting to you're starting to think about it and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Anywho, let's see how Richard Ramirez holds up in our ranking of evil people. But, all right. So the Night Stalker, whose crimes spanned only a year, which let's just think about that, y'all. Mm-hmm. He only killed for 1 year.
He only killed for 1 year?
Yes. He did a bunch of other crimes before that, but he only killed for 1 year.
What?
Yeah.
I knew it was like a spree killing with him, but I didn't realize it was only like within 365 days.
Well, technically it was like 14 months, but basically a year.
But still, though,
yeah.
That's nuts.
I know. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, that's what's really like...
when you break it down like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's like what's kind of mind-boggling about this because it's like, he was like having to go every single time. And I can't even imagine killing one person, like, and how much that would be, you know? It's like doing that many people, and it's a lot. And it's just a lot to think about. But regardless, let's get back into it. So
there's no way it was only one. No. I know, like proven, but he's gotta have killed before then, and we just don't know.
Right.
There's no way.
Well, at least once he's convicted for, it was only for that spree.
I mean, unless something in his criminality, and something in his brain just flipped, and he's like, you know what? I'm killing.
I don't know. I think it was a slow burn for him. Like, you know, he was going to get there eventually. It just...
Yeah, and then that's what I was saying. It's like, and then it just flips one day, and he's like, I'm going to start killing. And he killed all the way up until they beat his butt in the street.
Yeah, basically.
And then there you have it,
That's
folks.
a good way to describe it.
And he would have kept going.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
that butt kicking, if you will.
It's like Richard Ramirez. It's such a Hollywood.
It's such a right. It feels like a
Hollywood movie story.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Between 1984 and 1985, he committed a series of burglaries, rapes, and murders. In 1988, he was convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries.
Woo!
He stayed busy.
Lord.
Yeah. Notably, Ramirez exhibited no discernible pattern in his victims' races or the locations of his crimes, which is also very fascinating. Mm-hmm. But we've also covered a couple different killers who have been like that, where they're like, anybody is fine.
Yeah.
You know? So I guess that's somewhat common in some of these, but interesting to note. Which range from apartments to houses across Los Angeles and San Francisco. His childhood experiences, which included exposure to violence and Satanism, also contributed to the style and nature of his crimes.
Yep.
Yes. So in the 1960s, let's get into Ramirez's early life, which was awful in every facet.
I'm sure it was. Usually is.
It always is. So Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, better known as Richard Ramirez, was born on February 29th, 1960 in El Paso, Texas, to Mexican immigrant parents Mercedes Munoz and Julian Tapia Ramirez. He was the youngest of 5 children, and I wonder if any of his siblings had some kind of psychopathy or sociopath.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to look up.
Yeah. It's just something I'm wondering, because I'm like, if they're all probably experiencing similar experiences, I wonder if it affected any of his siblings. Just an idea. So his father was a railway laborer, and he struggled with alcoholism and bouts of anger that often led to physical abuse towards his wife and children. Ramirez himself endured frequent abuse from his father, which resulted in brain damage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's something that some doctors theorize is the reason he became the way he is because of the brain damage. But I think it's a combination of a lot of things personally. But he was raised in a Catholic household. Ramirez's life took a turning point at the age of 10 when he began experimenting with marijuana and alcohol after hanging out with his cousin Miguel Angel Mike Villegas. Villegas was a decorated Green Beret in the U.S. Army and a Vietnam War veteran who had schizophrenia and PTSD.
Oh, wow.
And this man was psycho, dude. Psycho. And and we're going to talk all about him, but I'm like, I'll
ask my granddad if he knows him, because my granddad was also a decorated Green Beret in the Army in Vietnam.
Insane. That would be insane. He might actually, because that would have been at the same exact time. Wow.
That's crazy, huh?
Well, he's horrid. So I'm sure he would remember. Yeah. So according to reports, when he was 12 years old, his cousin, the Vietnam War veteran, would also show Ramirez photographs of the women he had abused, raped, and killed, and some posing with a severed head all over in Vietnam.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, he had like little Polaroid photos, and he'd bring them out.
Goodness gracious.
And it's like, I cannot imagine being in the mindset of being like, hey, little cousin, come over here and let me show you.
He's just bragging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's like, look what I did. That's exactly what it was.
That's exactly what it was. But it is alleged that many of these photos depicted women being tied to trees or wooden posts, both before and after they were sexually assaulted and killed by Villegas.
Jeez. So he's a serial killer too.
Yeah.
So it does kind of run in the family. It's in the blood.
Genes. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, there's got to be something genetic to it. There's got to be something genetic, because, how rare is it that somebody kills multiple people, right? Mm-hmm. Like, especially with a cooling off period.
Right.
Like how rare is that? And then for it to be 2 in the same family, come on, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think his cousin had a lot to do with adding to him becoming a even more organized psychopath, if you will. Because we'll actually talk about that now. So Ramirez would later state while incarcerated that he was fascinated by the images and the stories that Mike shared with him rather than being repulsed.
Okay.
And so Ramirez learned military skills from his cousin that he would later employ during his killing spree, including stealth and kill tactics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so the following year, when Ramirez was 15, he witnessed his cousin Mike fatally shoot his wife.
Whoa.
Yeah. And around this time, Ramirez also began breaking into homes, and after that, he ended up dropping out of high school.
Yeah.
So
this dude, what was his name? Velez?
Yeah.
Yeah. Miguel. Miguel had quite the impression on him, probably.
Very much so. I think
That's insane.
Yeah. He definitely idolized him in a lot of ways.
Gracious.
But,
all right.
Yeah, and also around this time, Ramirez began seeking escape from his father's violent temper by sleeping in a local cemetery.
Yeah, I knew that.
Which that's the one fact when people bring up Richard Ramirez, that's the fact I remember
is
the most.
Is that he slept in the cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he claimed that he was more comfortable with the dead than the living. Mm-hmm. Which I'm like, I understand that to a degree, but still. But his father would tie him to a crucifix in the cemetery overnight as punishment.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, what cemetery isn't like watched over to the point where you can do that?
Well, I mean, Texas is really large, so if you can find the right one,
I guess
in the middle
in a rural area.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Because any cop is going to go by there and go,
Is this boy on a crucifix?
Yeah.
Oh,
my Lord.
I don't know, Jay. It was the 60s. But well, technically the 70s, I guess.
Yeah.
But shortly after turning 14, though, in 1974, Ramirez started using LSD frequently. Okay. And some doctors also think that might have affected his brain chemistry because he also had brain damage.
I think it's probably the cross.
Probably the crucifix.
Being tied to a crucifix. I think that might have a little something to do with it. I don't know.
Exactly. So he and Mike resumed bonding over their shared drug and alcohol use.
Oh, bonding.
And so this was a year before Mike.
Little cousin bonding.
Yes, I know. So sweet. This was a year before Mike would kill his wife, too.
Okay.
So that's why, if you're wondering why they're back together.
Did he do the wife and then do himself?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
So, so they resumed bonding over their shared drug and alcohol use. And during this period, Ramirez developed an interest in Satanism and the occult. And so as he entered adolescence, he began to combine his growing sexual fantasies with graphic violence, including forced bondage, murder, mutilation, and rape.
Yeah.
And he continued to commit crimes and was briefly imprisoned for stealing a car.
Okay.
So, common.
Yeah, it's just starting to go up.
Exactly.
It's starting to climb the hill of wickedness.
And so psychiatrist Michael Stone describes Ramirez as a made psychopath rather than a born one.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I can get behind that to a degree because he definitely has a lot of the experiences that have been reported or documented to cause psychopathy.
Yeah.
And create serial killers.
Yeah.
But I do think you might be onto something, Jay, where it is in the bloodline a little bit.
Well, it might be in the bloodline and lie dormant until triggered.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's there. And if he experiences enough violence and enough, just problems in his own life, and he sees the things that psychopaths enjoy, that might trigger the genetic makeup. Because there are illnesses too that do that. They lay dormant until something happens, something very specific happens.
It's very true.
I think schizophrenia is one of them, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so psychopathy. So basically, he was the made psychopath rather than the born one. And Stone attributes Ramirez's indifference to his victim's suffering and untreatably to his schizoid personality disorder.
Okay.
So Stone also mentions that Ramirez was knocked unconscious and nearly died on multiple occasions before he was 6 years old. And as a result, he later developed temporal lobe epilepsy, aggressivity, and hypersexuality.
Dang.
Yeah. Yeah, his dad beat the hell out of him.
Oh, my God. Mm-hmm. That is wild, yo.
Yeah, which is just interesting. And I think it's an interesting, fact so that, psychologists and scientists can start studying what exactly causes these things.
Yeah.
And I feel like, maybe they did save his brain. Actually, I know they probably didn't save his brain for other reasons. But I feel like they should have saved his brain in the way of studying it to see if there's any kind of similarities between him and other killers that are like him. But yeah, some of his earliest crimes, though, going back to the shooting that his cousin did, on May 4th, 1975, Miguel fatally shot his second wife, Jessie, in the face with a handgun during a domestic argument while Ramirez was present.
Wow.
He was just a bad guy.
Yeah.
And
extremely bad guy.
Later, Ramirez was found not guilty of Jessie's murder due to insanity.
Huh?
Because of the fact that he had PTSD and it was stemming from his military service. So they think he had a psychotic break, basically.
Okay.
And that was why he was in...
Sure.
Yeah. And so they think that's why he killed Jessie. I think he just liked doing it.
Yeah, I was about to say. I'm like, nah, dog. Like, I mean, look at what he did over in Vietnam. I don't think they probably knew that, though.
Right. I don't think they did. And I highly doubt anybody reported him for it. And so, like the graphic photos and stories of his cousin's war crimes in Vietnam, Ramirez later remarked that witnessing the murder did not traumatize him in a conventional sense, but rather fascinated him. Mm-hmm. So he was already enjoying it at a very early age. So following the shooting, Ramirez became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers. In the 9th grade, shortly before the school year ended in 1975, Ramirez dropped out of Jefferson High School. And a few months later, Ramirez moved in with his sister Ruth and her husband Roberto. And another freak in the family, Roberto, was a peeping Tom.
Well, of course he was.
Yeah. And would accompany Ramirez on his after-dark voyeuristic escapades. Wow. Yeah. And so in 1977, Miguel was released from Texas State Mental Hospital and occasionally joined Ramirez and Roberto on these voyeuristic walks, spying on women in the nearby areas through their windows.
Goodness gracious. So they're not even blood related.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Heard that.
They just attract. But during this period, Ramirez also secured a job at a local Holiday Inn where he used his master key to break into hotel rooms and steal from sleeping guests, which,
There we go. Climbing a mountain.
Climbing the mountain and climbing it even further. On at least one occasion, Ramirez molested 2 children in an elevator at the hotel, but he evaded prosecution for that act.
I wonder how.
Yeah, I think it was because he was underage.
Okay.
So his employment abruptly ended, as you can imagine, after Ramirez attempted to rape a woman in her hotel room and was caught in the act by the victim's husband. So despite the husband's physical assault, criminal charges were dropped when the couple residing out of state declined to return to Texas to testify against Ramirez.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, they probably just wanted it to be done.
Right.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, because the husband literally beat the snot out of him, apparently.
Good.
So.
Oh, yeah.
Which, understandably.
Knocked him unconscious for 10th time.
Right. Yeah, he got knocked unconscious a lot throughout life, but...
He was a thin dude.
He was.
I mean, I don't think it'd be very hard to, whoop his ass.
Yeah, I think it was more so that he was tall, that was, the hardest thing, because he was just lanky. But... moving into 1982, Ramirez would relocate to California, where the majority of his crimes took place. Mm-hmm. So during this period, he lived a nomadic lifestyle, moving between San Francisco and Los Angeles County. By the time he was 22 and had left his home in Texas, Ramirez had developed a frequent cocaine addiction. To support his drug habit, he often resorted to burglaries, which were frequently accompanied by murders, attempted rapes, and battery. He just did it all.
Yeah, he sure did.
And so Ramirez employed a diverse array of ways to kill, if you will. A lot of the weapons he had included handguns, various types of knives, a machete, a tire iron, and a claw hammer.
Wow.
He inflicted severe injuries on his victims, including punching, pistol whipping, and strangulation, both with his hands and in one instance using a ligature.
He liked to experiment.
He did.
That's one of the things that make him so scary, is that he likes to
see what happens.
Yeah, he liked to experiment.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell and also I think that added into the way that was so hard for them to catch on to him for a period of time. He was sloppy in a lot of other ways. But in that way, that would make it typically difficult in an investigation because there wouldn't necessarily be consistencies there that would lead to the idea of a serial killer. But he also stomped at least one victim to death while she slept.
He might have had like a checklist of like,
that's a good point.
The different ways that he wants to kill.
Right.
And he's like, I'm going to do stomping tonight.
Yeah. I could see that. I could definitely see that.
Freak.
But additionally, he tortured another victim by shocking her with a live electrical cord.
Sounds like that would be on a serial killer list.
I feel like that would be on the bucket list.
Yeah.
Furthermore, Ramirez frequently took pleasure in degrading and humiliating his victims, particularly those who survived his attacks or whom he had explicitly chosen not to kill.
Yep.
And that was because he was so cocky, but also I think he didn't care if he died or got caught,
Yeah.
I think there was a lack of regard for his own life. So he's like...
But he was so good at getting away with it.
Exactly. And that's where the cockiness comes from. Yeah. He's like, I'm going to let this one go because
I mean, his MO is not having an MO.
Exactly.
Like, that's why it's so hard for him to catch him.
Yeah. Totally.
I'm going to write that down under difficulty of investigation.
There you go.
We have, for those just listening and not watching, we have a
little
whiteboard.
So on April 10th, 1984, Ramirez basically claims the life of his first victim. Now, this one is a little suspicious, if you will, just because there isn't necessarily hard evidence for this.
Yeah.
But so the murder spree terrorized the residents of greater Los Angeles and later the San Francisco Bay Area for 14 months. And so his first known murder occurred as early as April 1984. This crime was not connected to Ramirez or known to be his doing until 2009.
Yep.
And Ramirez's first known murder was of a 9-year-old girl, Mei Lung, a Chinese-American girl. Lung was with her 8-year-old brother when Ramirez approached her in the basement of Hotel Cecil.
Wow.
Which I was like, of course your first murder was in Hotel
Cecil.
Like,
yeah. Wow.
Like, I wonder if he knew that and he was like, this feels like a good start,
Sure. Sure.
Because it would have been notorious then, but yeah, he was living there. And so he was living in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco.
Not the Tenderloin district.
Yeah, delicious.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And so Ramirez told Lung to follow him into the basement to find a lost $1 bill.
Oh,
just like,
well, I mean, she's a kid.
I guess so.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, help me go find this dollar. But
and she's probably thinking like on it.
Yeah, probably.
Heck yeah, mystery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once they were in the basement, he beat, strangled, and raped Lung before stabbing her to death with a switchblade.
Jeez.
He then hung her partially nude body from a pipe by her blouse.
He's
just
not
repulsive.
Care.
No, he had so little regard for these people. He didn't see them as people. Yeah. He saw them as toys almost.
Now, do you think that, and this is a reach, y'all, but do you think that the first time he's seeing like dead women and, decapitated women, all of that, they're Asian? And he wanted maybe his first to be an Asian, or
like his cousin.
Do you think there's a connection there?
I mean, there definitely could be. Like, even just subconsciously, there could be.
Yeah, totally could have been a crime of opportunity, but also, I mean, he is the Night Stalker.
That is true. That is very true. That's an interesting point. And I think it's also interesting that he hung her body from a pipe almost to symbolize, like, because she was a child and he was being tied to a crucifix when he was a child, and maybe there's a correlation there of he's in his sick little mind, outwardly expressing what he went through onto another person.
Interesting, Madison.
But no, that is all speculation. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing to prove that.
Just thinking about it.
Yeah. So initially, this crime was not linked to Ramirez's crime spree, but in 2009, DNA evidence matched a sample obtained at the crime scene, confirming that Ramirez was the perpetrator. In 2016, though, officials disclosed that a second suspect was likely present based on DNA evidence, but they were not publicly identified due to insufficient evidence. So I wonder if his cousin was there.
Yeah. Oh.
Like if he wanted to, you know? Because I'm like, if there was ever going to be a second suspect on one of these crimes on his first murder, who do you think he'd call?
Interesting. Based on DNA evidence, too.
Yeah.
Would they? No, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But it was never publicly identified because the evidence wasn't hard enough. But I'm like...
Yeah. That's wild, y'all.
That's, again, reaching. But that would be my best bet if he was going to bring anybody around him.
Sure.
But then on June 28th, 1984, was the technically first official Night Stalker murder in L.A., and on June 28th, 1984, Jenny Vincow, a 79-year-old woman, was discovered murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. The gruesome scene revealed that she had been repeatedly stabbed in the head, neck, and chest while asleep in her bed. Her throat had been slashed so deeply that she was on the brink of decapitation. And a crucial piece of evidence was Ramirez's fingerprint was found on a mesh screen he had removed to gain access through an open window. The discovery marked his second known murder and unveiled his disturbing pattern of breaking into homes, committing particularly vicious murders, and often burglarizing his victims either before or after the killings, probably to get, money for his drugs. He's like, I already did it, so,
take what you can get. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, the primary motive behind these acts is to support his drug addiction and pay his rent. And he was living in Hotel Cecil, so
wow,
I can't imagine how much he was paying, but still,
that's crazy.
Nonetheless. Then moving on to March 17th, 1985, the serial murders begin. 9 months later, on March 17th, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead after she pulled into her garage. Ramirez shot her in the face with a .22 caliber handgun. They love a .22.
They love it. They love it. It's quiet, subsonic, and it doesn't leave a ton of blood spatter, but it does a job. Yeah. And it's cheap ammunition.
Yeah. I swear, every single serial killer we read about or watch a documentary on, they all use it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's like the perfect medium because 9mm super loud. The ammunition's way more expensive. You can get. I mean, obviously it'd been different back then, but even right now you can get 50 .22 rounds for $8.
Right.
The gun store down the road. So, and 9mm rounds, that could be average around 20 to 30.
Right. So there you go. Mm-hmm. But miraculously, Hernandez survived because the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands as she lifted them to protect herself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I know.
crazy.
That is so lucky. That's insane. But Hernandez feigned death until Ramirez left the scene.
Good for her.
Yeah, seriously. Inside the house, her roommate, 34-year-old Dale Yoshi Okazaki, heard the gunshot and ducked behind a counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. Mm-hmm. As Okazaki raised her head to investigate, Ramirez, who had been waiting for her to peek over the counter, shot her once in the forehead, instantly killing her.
He was playing a game at that point.
He really was. It was like a cat and mouse game. Yeah. He's just sick, and he loved it too. And it's just
he
like,
loved it.
Exactly. Within an hour of the Rosemead attack, Ramirez abducted 30-year-old Cy Leon Veronica Yu from her car in Monterey Park. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't enough for him. He had to keep same going. Night. Exactly. Yeah. Ramirez shot her twice with a .22 caliber handgun and fled the scene. Veronica was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital.
So his first 3 kills were Asian women.
Yes.
Y'all, I mean, now I'm starting to get a little bit more of a connection to that must have meant a lot to him, mm-hmm.
Probably. Yeah, it's making more and more sense that he might be trying to emulate his cousin in that way, because he definitely had such a profound impact on him. Uh-huh. And that was his example of what a killer is,
Damn.
So... And so the two murders and an attempted third that occurred in a single day garnered extensive media coverage. The perpetrator described as having curly hair, bulging eyes, and wide space, rotting teeth, which is very accurate.
Very accurate.
And was dubbed the walk-in killer and the valley intruder by the news media. And so let me show you, Jay, the composite.
Yeah. No, I've seen that.
It's just...
I've seen that. Goodness
it's so
gracious.
bad.
It is so bad.
And eventually, y'all, we'll insert it. Eventually, at some point in the investigation, he wore a hat. And so they were like, he has a hat. And so they just drew a little hat onto this same horrible composite. And it's just ridiculous, you know. But continuing on to March 27th, 1985, for the Whittier murders. 1 week later, at around 2 a.m. on March 27th, 1985, Ramirez re-entered a house he had burglarized a year earlier. So now he's getting even more confident, you know, just outside of Whittier. Inside, he found 64-year-old Vincent Charles Zazara sleeping in his bed and shot him in the head with a gun. Zazara's wife, Maxine Lavinia Zazara, was awakened by the gunshot, and Ramirez immediately beat her and bound her hands while demanding to know where her shotgun or her valuables were. As he ransacked the room, Maxine managed to escape her bonds and grabbed a shotgun from under the bed, unaware that it was unloaded. Yeah. Which sucks so bad. Yeah. And so in a moment of desperation, she pulled the trigger just as Ramirez turned around and saw her. And infuriated, he shot her 3 times with his handgun, killing her.
Yep. Mm-hmm. He was mad that he let that happen.
Exactly.
Bet you anything.
And that she got out of the binds.
Yeah.
You know, he's how did you get out of this? I must have tied it wrong or whatever, you know. And so then he fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen and began mutilating her body. He cut an inverted cross into her chest and removed her eyes, placing them in a jewelry box.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. The eyes in the jewelry box thing, I think, might have been like a souvenir, if you will.
Definitely.
You know, because there would be no other reason. But then, or almost like this one saw me, so I have to take her eyes or something, you know?
Yeah.
Because he's never taken...
Why does dude have us like thinking like a serial killer?
I know. It's like because you're trying to play his mind game because there's like no other way to understand
to justify it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so he attempted to have sex with her body, and Ramirez was so shaken by Maxine's attempt to shoot him that he was unable to achieve an erection.
Wow.
He took the jewelry box containing her eyes and kept it in as a macabre souvenir at his apartment until his arrest.
That's exactly it, Madison. That's why he took her eyes.
Yeah.
1,000%. Because he probably looked at those eyes. Here we go, creepy again.
Yeah.
I promise we're not this creepy. I promise. He probably took those eyes thinking he was the last thing she saw with them.
Yeah, I could see that, you know, because... And yeah, again, we just read a lot of these cases, and that's the way these
We're going to be on a list after this
Oh
episode.
my God, probably. But yeah, Ramirez left footprints. This is why I said he was sloppy in certain ways. He left footprints from a pair of Avia sneakers in the flower beds near the house, which the police photographed and cast. And that's going to come in handy later on.
What bit it is.
Additionally, bullets found at the scene were matched to those found at previous attacks, leading to the police to believe that they were dealing with a serial killer. And so on May 14th, 1985, Ramirez returned to Monterey Park and broke into the home of 66-year-old Bill Doy and his disabled wife, Lillian Doy, who was 56 at the time. Surprising Doy in his bedroom, Ramirez shot him in the face with a .22 semi-automatic pistol as Doy reached for his own handgun. After beating him mortally and wounding the man into unconsciousness, Ramirez entered Lillian's bedroom, bound her with thumb cuffs, and then raped her. Bill succumbed to his injuries while hospitalized. So I'm wondering, because he did this right after the Whittier case. And I'm wondering if he wanted to target another older couple to do it properly this time. Because the last one didn't go as planned.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that definitely could be it.
But then moving to May 29th, 1985. So 2 weeks later, on May 29th, Ramirez stole a car and drove to Monrovia, and he stopped at the house of Mabel Ma Bell, an 83-year-old woman, and her disabled sister, Florence Nettie Lang, who was 81. In the kitchen, Ramirez found a hammer and brutally bludgeoned and bound Lang in her bedroom. He then bound and bludgeoned Bell before using an electrical cord to shock her. After raping Lang, Ramirez used Bell's lipstick to draw a satanic pentagram symbol on her thigh and on the walls of both bedrooms. 2 days later, the women were found alive but in critical state, both comatose. Wow. He let them live for that, too, which is just horrific.
Insane.
And so Bell succumbed to her injuries in the hospital on July 15th, 1985, while Lang passed away in August 1985.
He was messy for an organized serial killer.
And I can't tell if that was on purpose or if like he wanted to see how brazen he could be.
Yeah.
Before getting caught. But there just is, he doesn't behave like a normal disorganized serial killer. You know what I mean? It's just, it's very odd. The whole case is just odd because I don't think anybody can truly get into his mind and understand why he did things. But it did feel very purposeful a lot of times and calculated. But on May 30th, 1985, the following day, Ramirez drove the same car to Burbank and stealthily entered the residence of 42-year-old Carol Kyle. At gunpoint, he apprehended Kyle and her 11-year-old son, handcuffing them both. Subsequently, he proceeded to ransack the house. After releasing Kyle, he instructed her to lead him to the location of the family's valuables. During this time, he repeatedly raped her. And Ramirez also made it a point to prevent Kyle from looking at him. He didn't want these people to see him. And threatening to cut her eyes out at one point. After retrieving the child from the closet and rebinding them together with the handcuffs, he fled the scene.
He inflicted so much fear before like death and torture and all
I think
of that.
That's what got him off. You know, it's like knowing that those memories, if he lets them live, they're never going to leave those people, and they're always going to think of him, which is fueling his narcissism.
Absolutely.
You know? On July 2nd, 1985, Ramirez, driving a stolen car, randomly selected the house of 75-year-old Mary Louise Cannon, a widowed grandmother in Arcadia. After quietly entering Cannon's home, he found her asleep in her bedroom. He bludgeoned her unconsciously with a lamp, then stabbed her to death using a 10-inch butcher knife from her kitchen. Ramirez then reportedly stabbed Cannon's body after she had already died.
It's a brutal summer.
Very brutal summer. Severely brutal summer. And then in a couple days later, 3 nights later, on July 5th, 1985, Ramirez, driven by an uncontrollable rage, embarked on a journey to Sierra Madre, California. His actions took a horrific turn when he broke into a home and brutally bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett while she peacefully slept in her bedroom. In a desperate attempt to inflict further harm, Ramirez searched the kitchen in vain for a knife, only to resort to strangling the helpless girl with a telephone cord. The sight of electrical sparks emanating from the cord startled him, and when Bennett miraculously began to breathe, he panicked and fled the house, convinced that Jesus Christ had intervened to save her life.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what he said? That's what he testified?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he said that one didn't work out because Jesus Christ got in the way.
Okay.
So there you go. Despite the harrowing ordeal.
So he believes in Jesus.
Yeah, because he believes in Satan, and he feels that he belongs to Satan, versus all these other people belong to Jesus.
But he obviously fears Jesus.
I guess to a degree.
Wow,
but
it's crazy.
Despite the harrowing ordeal, Bennett miraculously survived the attack, but sustained 478 stitches to close the deep lacerations on her scalp.
Oh my
Could you just even imagine?
478 stitches.
Literally. How she lived is seriously a miracle. But it's like, I can't even imagine how gory that scene was because the scalp bleeds so much.
Like a sieve, yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that it needed 478 stitches, it's like he practically scalped her.
Yeah.
It's insane. So on July 7th, so just a couple days later, Ramirez burglarized the home of 6-year-old Joyce Lucille Nelson in Monterey Park. While he found her asleep on her living room couch, he brutally beat her to death by repeatedly stomping on her face. A shoe print from an Avia sneaker was left on her face as evidence. After driving, and again, the Avia sneaker is going to come in hand a lot later on. After driving through 2 other neighborhoods, he returned to Monterey Park and chose the home of Sophie Dickman, a 63-year-old woman. Ramirez assaulted and handcuffed Dickman at gunpoint, attempted to rape her, and stole her jewelry. When she threatened to tell the police about his crimes, he coerced her into swearing on Satan.
Wow.
That was like one of his catchphrases, is swear on Satan.
Swear on Satan.
Yeah. Then 2 weeks later, on July 20th, Ramirez bought a machete and stole a Toyota before driving to Glendale. He targeted the home of 66-year-old Layla Needing and her husband, 68-year-old Maxon Needing. He burst into their sleeping bedroom, hacked them with the machete, and then shot them both in the head with a .22 caliber handgun.
He's an animal.
He's a full animal. Like, he enjoys it.
God.
He wants it to be as gruesome and bloody as possible.
Yeah.
It feels like. And so he further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house of its valuables. After quickly securing the stolen items, Ramirez drove to Sun Valley, Los Angeles, and broke into the home of Kovaneth, the Kovaneth family. And he shot the sleeping 32-year-old Xianrong Kovaneth in the head with a .22 caliber handgun, instantly killing him. Then he repeatedly raped and beat 32-year-old Somkid Kovaneth, and he bound the couple's 8-year-old son and dragged Somkid around the house, searching for any valuable items that he could steal.
Why would he drag the kid around the house?
Well, so that was the 32-year-old. He dragged a 32-year-old.
Oh, he bound the kid and then dragged.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. I see.
I think he just wanted to torture them, you know? And so he was like, oh, I'm just going to bring you along for the ride here, which is insane. Again, experimenting, seeing what happens. And during the assault, he demanded that Somkid swear to Satan that she was not hiding any money from him.
Swear to Satan.
Swear to Satan.
Lord.
And on August 6, 1985, Ramirez drove to Northridge and broke into the home of Chris Peterson, a 30-year-old, and his wife, Virginia Peterson, who was 27. He crept into their bedroom, startling Virginia, and shot her in the face with a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun.
Weird. Just throw him off?
Yeah, I think so. Like, what's the difference with that?
Just the size of caliber. I mean, it's not that much difference.
Yeah. You're probably right, just to throw him off. But in the ensuing struggle, Chris fought back while trying to avoid being hit by 2 more shots. Ramirez managed to escape before Chris could apprehend him. Despite the experience, the couple miraculously survived their injuries. And then 2 nights later, on August 8th, 1985, Ramirez, driving a stolen car again, arrived at the home of Sakina Abuwath, a 27-year-old woman, and her husband, Elias Abuwath, a 31-year-old man. Around 2:30 a.m., Ramirez entered the house and went into the master bedroom, where he found Elias sleeping. Without hesitation, he shot Elias in the head with a .25 caliber handgun, instantly killing him. Next, Ramirez handcuffed and beat Sakina while forcing her to reveal the locations of the family's jewelry. Then he brutally raped her. Throughout the assault, he repeatedly demanded that she swear on Satan that she would not scream during his attacks. As the couple's 3-year-old son entered the bedroom, Ramirez tied him up and continued his assault on Sakina. After Ramirez left the house, Sakina untied her son and sent him to the neighbors for help.
Wow.
Which is like, and I think, again, he lets some of these women, the mothers especially, because it's almost like he wants them.
Can he be convinced is the question.
Right.
Like, what did she say or do to convince him to leave her kid alone?
Right.
You know?
Exactly. It is very interesting. And so then on August 18th, 1985, Ramirez, who had been closely following the news coverage, as they all do, of his crimes, left Los Angeles and headed to San Francisco. And on August 18th, he entered the home of 66-year-old Peter Pan, which is his real name.
Okay.
That was his real name.
Heard.
And 62-year-old Barbara Pan. And he shot Peter in the temple with a .25 caliber handgun, instantly killing him. He then beat and sexually assaulted Barbara before shooting her in the head and leaving her for dead. At the crime scene, Ramirez used lipstick to scrawl a pentagram and phrase "Jack the Knife" on the bedroom wall. Which I have no idea
Jack the Knife.
What that's supposed to mean. But he also left a shoe print at the scene that detectives later discovered and matched to a specific pair of Avia shoes that were not commonly worn at the time. And that's when the investigation is closing in on Ramirez. Also, I put this screenshot that we'll put in here with one of the articles that was published during the time of the investigations with the composite and a graph of what they believe Ramirez's teeth looked like.
Wow.
From a dental perspective.
That's cool. I've never seen that, actually.
I know. I dug through the FBI's archives, which, if you're interested, they have like 252 articles from the newspapers in the FBI database on Richard Ramirez.
Jeez.
Yeah. But lead detectives Frank Salerno, the prize gem of California in the forensics world, and Gil Carrillo reached out to the shoe manufacturer and managed to retrieve the soles. That was genius.
Wow. Yeah, that was.
Upon learning the manufacturer's make and distribution across the United States, only 6 pairs of these specific shoes in men's size 11.5 were found.
Wow.
5 pairs were shipped to locations in Arizona, while 1 pair was sent to a shoe store in Los Angeles. So there's only 1 person in Los Angeles who owns these shoes. And that indicated that the sole pair of the same size and kind in California belonged to the perpetrator. When it was described that the ballistics and shoe print evidence from Los Angeles crime scenes matched the Pan crime scene, San Francisco's then mayor, Dianne Feinstein, revealed the information, including the gun caliber, during a televised press conference. Now, this leak enraged the detectives because they knew he was probably watching, but they knew that he was following the news coverage and potentially destroying crucial forensic evidence. And that night, Ramirez, who had indeed been monitoring the press, dropped his sneakers over the side of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Over the side of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
That's so...
It's so Hollywood.
It's so Hollywood.
Yeah.
This man is, he's Hollywood.
He really is.
It's crazy.
And he stayed in the area for a few more days before returning to the Los Angeles area. In August 1985, Los Angeles County offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the capture of the Night Stalker. And then on August 24th, 1985, Ramirez, driving a stolen orange Toyota, traveled 76 miles south of Los Angeles to Mission Viejo. That night, he arrived at the home of James Romero Jr., a 45-year-old man who had just returned from a family vacation in Rosarito Beach, Mexico. Romero's 13-year-old son, James Romero III, was awake. While his family slept, James went outside to retrieve a pillow from a truck that was locked. As he was outside, he heard a rustling noise. Assuming it was an animal, he went to investigate but didn't notice anything unusual. James then went into his garage to work on his mini bike when he heard Ramirez's footsteps outside the house. Thinking there was a prowler, James observed Ramirez through his bedroom window and went to wake his parents. Now, Ramirez fled the scene at that moment. James rushed outside and noted the car's color, make, and style, and was as well as being able to see a partial license plate number.
Good for him.
Mm-hmm.
Dang.
Seriously. So Romero contacted the police with this information, believing that James had chased away a thief. Ramirez, after aborting his attack on the Romero residence broke into the home of 30-year-old Bill Carnes and his 29-year-old fiancée, Inez Erickson, through a back door. Ramirez entered the sleeping couple's bedroom and woke Carnes when he pointed his .25 caliber handgun at him. He shot Carnes 3 times in the head before turning his attention to Erickson, identifying himself as the Night Stalker. Ramirez forced Erickson to swear an oath of love for Satan while beating her with his fists and binding her with neckties from the closet.
Wow.
After stealing what he could find, Ramirez dragged Erickson to another room before raping her. He then demanded cash and jewelry from her and made her swear on Satan that there was no more. Before leaving the home, he instructed Erickson to inform others that the Night Stalker had been there. Erickson managed to untie herself and sought help from a neighbor's house. Surgeons successfully removed 2 of the 3 bullets from Carnes' head, and he miraculously survived his injuries.
Wow.
So the identification of Ramirez starts, and Erickson provided a detailed description of her assailant to investigators, and the police managed to obtain a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. On August 28th, the stolen Toyota was found abandoned in Koreatown, Los Angeles, despite Ramirez's efforts to clean the car thoroughly. Police were able to obtain a single fingerprint from the rearview mirror. The fingerprint was positively identified as belonging to Ramirez. He was described as a 25-year-old drifter from Texas with a long criminal history, including numerous arrests. Oh, yes, bless you. Including numerous arrests for traffic and drug violations. The identification of Ramirez's print was considered a near miracle because the system used for fingerprint identification was recently installed and contained the fingerprints of criminals born after January 1st, 1960. So they just barely had him. Yeah. And just 2 months before Ramirez's birth. On August 29th, 1985, law enforcement officials decided to release a mugshot of Ramirez from an arrest for auto theft that occurred in 1984. At the police press conference, they announced, "We know who you are now, and soon everyone else will. There will be no place you can hide." And boy, wasn't there.
Yeah, I was about to say.
On August 30th, 1985, Ramirez boarded a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, oblivious to the fact that he had become the focal point of virtually every major newspaper and television news program across California.
Yeah.
And upon his return to Los Angeles early on August 31st, Ramirez found himself walking past police officers stationed at the bus terminal, who were diligently waiting to apprehend the killer should he attempt to flee on an outbound bus. He then entered a convenience store in East Los Angeles. As he was browsing through the store, Ramirez noticed a group of elderly Hispanic women fearfully identifying him as El Matador.
Ooh. To
his horror, he saw his face on the front page of the newspaper La Opinion, accompanied by a chilling headline that read Invasor Nocturno, meaning night invader. Panicked, Ramirez fled the store.
Wow.
Again, that's so Hollywood too.
It is. It's all like so Hollywood.
You can picture as like a film watching all of this. And in his haste, Ramirez sprinted across the Santa Ana freeway, attempting to carjack an unlocked Ford Mustang. However, his attempt was thwarted by the intervention of angry residents, Faustino Piñon and Jose Bernion, who pulled him out of the car. Undeterred, Ramirez crossed the street and attempted to snatch car keys from Angelina de la Torre. Her husband, Manuel de la Torre, witnessed the attempted theft and in the pursuit struck Ramirez over the head with a fence post.
Nice. Not a fence post.
Which I'm hoping that was like maybe in the back of their truck or something. But I'm like, there you go.
Carrying a fence post.
There you go. That will knock you out, apparently. So as the situation escalated, a group of over 10 residents, including Jose Bernion's sons, formed and pursued Ramirez down Hubbard Street in Boyle Heights. They soon managed to apprehend him and relentlessly beat him.
Nice.
They beat his ass in the street.
Yes, they did.
At approximately 8 a.m., police were alerted to a disturbance in the area, but they arrived at Hubbard Street only to find Ramirez in a state of severe beating. They promptly took him into custody.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so there you go. That's citizen arrest at its finest, if you will.
True.
So in July 1988 was...
Don't mess with Bull Heights, man.
Seriously. They were ready.
They were ready.
They were
with their fins posed.
They're like, we know El Matador. Let's get it. So... but Ramirez's first court appearance happened on July 22nd, 1988, and the jury selection for Ramirez's trial commenced. During his initial court appearance, he raised his hand adorned with a pentagram and exclaimed, "Hail Satan." He was really into it. So,
oh yeah.
On August 3rd, 1988, the Los Angeles Times reported that some jail employees had overheard Ramirez plotting to shoot the prosecutor with a concealed gun. And as a result, a metal detector was installed outside the courtroom, and thorough searches were conducted on individuals entering. So then on August 14th, 1988, Ramirez's trial is delayed. So on August 14th, the trial was abruptly halted due to the absence of one of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary. Now, tragically, she was later discovered shot to death in her apartment. Yeah. The jury was left in a state of terror, speculating whether Ramirez had somehow orchestrated this event from within his prison cell and if he had the means to reach other jurors.
Wow.
However, it was ultimately determined that Ramirez was not responsible for Singletary's demise. She had been shot and killed by her boyfriend, who subsequently committed suicide using the same weapon in a hotel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that was just a
coincidence, but still crazy, right?
No, that's super crazy.
The alternate juror who replaced Singletary was too overcome with fear to return to her home. Mm-hmm. Now, on September 20th, 1989, Ramirez was found guilty of all 43 charges, including 13 counts of murder, 5 attempts of murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. During the penalty phase of the trial on November 7th, 1989, he was sentenced to death in California's gas chamber.
Yeah. I mean, he
deserved it.
There's anyone that deserves it.
To be gas chambered. Yeah.
Yikes.
The judge who upheld his 19 death sentence, he was given 19 death sentences. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
It's a lot to overturn.
Yeah. And so he remarked that Ramirez's actions demonstrated cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human comprehension. And after the death sentences were announced, Ramirez made a statement to reporters saying, "Big deal. Death has always been a part of the package. See you in Disneyland."
See you in Disneyland?
Yeah, I think that's what he's calling hell is Disneyland.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's off his rocker.
He's off his rocker.
Yikes.
The trial itself cost $1.8 million, making it the most expensive murder trial in California's history at the time, a record that was later surpassed by the O.J. Simpson case in 1994.
Interesting.
Throughout his life, Ramirez never expressed any remorse for his crimes.
He didn't have any.
Exactly. And so in incarceration, while awaiting trial, Ramirez reportedly met actor Sean Penn.
What?
Yeah. Penn, who served a 33-day sentence in 1987 for reckless driving and assaulting an extra on the TV show Colors, claimed to have received a letter from Ramirez while incarcerated. In his response, Ramirez expressed no sympathy and wished him dead in the gas chamber. By the time of his trial, Ramirez had garnered a fan base who wrote him letters and visited him in prison.
So he met Sean Penn. What are they both doing in the same area?
I thought the same thing. Like, poor Sean Penn is probably like, oh my God.
Yeah, literally.
Because he was only there for a 33-day sentence. Like, they should have
13 murders.
Yeah, they should
keep those separate.
Yeah, they should have Hannibal Lectered Ramirez at that point. Like, put him in a cage.
Yeah.
Because that man, like, was totally the type of threat where he could have been, like, caught making weapons, like makeshift weapons in prison and planning things. I'm like, he needed to be far away from people. But yeah. So he so one of his notable fans was Doreen Leoy, who began writing Ramirez nearly 75 letters during his incarceration, which is not uncommon with these really notorious killers who spent time in prison. They all seem to get a little fan base. And I think it's weird too, because just like Bundy was, there was this feeling that Richard Ramirez was attractive in a way. I don't get it. But
the teeth.
Yeah, the teeth, bro. Like, I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Like, his breath got a rank. But it's like, yeah. So women thought he was attractive. And there seems to be this fetish amongst some people where they just are really into the serial killer thing. Yeah. And so it's very common for this to happen. But in 1988, Ramirez proposed to Leoy, and she ended up getting out of that situation. They were no longer married. And at the time of his death, Ramirez was engaged to a 23-year-old writer. And
wow.
Yeah. And my bet, just because no basis.
We don't know who that is?
No.
Oh, okay.
So, and again, no basis for this idea, but just speculation. I feel like maybe she was trying to get an end for like the ultimate tell-all book or something. Maybe. Once he was killed.
Maybe.
Because imagine like the hook that would be as a writer, being like, I was married or I was engaged to Richard Ramirez.
Yeah.
No,
you're probably right.
I could see it. People do crazier things. So in August 2006, Ramirez's first round of state appeals concluded in a disappointing manner when the California Supreme Court upheld his convictions and death sentence. Disappointing for him. And so despite this setback, the California Supreme Court denied his request for a hearing on September 7, 2006. Ramirez continued to pursue additional appeals until the time of his passing. I'm like, dude, just take the L. Like, it's, at that point.
Right.
And so on June 7th, 2013, Ramirez was executed. So he was awaiting execution on California's death row and passed away on June 7, 2013 due to complications arising from B-cell lymphoma.
So you said he was executed, but he wasn't. He was awaiting
excuse me. Yeah, sorry.
He died.
Yeah.
What you meant. Yeah.
Yeah, so he died from complications from B-cell lymphoma.
Got it.
He was 53 years old. And additionally, he had been grappling with chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C viral infection. And since his body was not claimed, he was subsequently cremated, which is why I say I don't think they kept his brain because they burned that man to ashes.
Yeah, they might have took it out, though.
That is true. Well, I don't know. I'm sure they wouldn't tell anybody if they did have it. But just because crazy people would try to come get that. But... So to finish it up, just a couple of suspected victims of Richard Ramirez is on the night of June 27th, 1985, Patty Elaine Higgins, a 32-year-old woman, was tragically murdered in her Arcadia home. The gruesome crime remained hidden until July 2nd when she failed to show up for work. The perpetrator had brutally sodomized, strangled, and slashed her throat. Ramirez was subsequently charged with both murder and burglary in connection with Higgins' death. However, these charges were eventually dropped due to the absence of solid physical evidence linking him to the other murders. So that's why it's a little up there. But furthermore, based on a statement Ramirez made to an investigator, he also is the suspect of being involved in the San Francisco double murder of Christina and Mary Caldwell. The sisters were found stabbed to death in their Telegraph Hill apartment on February 20th, 1985. During his incarceration, Ramirez openly boasted to a prison officer and other inmates about having killed more than 20 people. So there definitely is a few out there.
There's got to be.
Yeah. But
there's got to be. I'm still drawing up my numbers, Lord.
I know. Well, that's all. Old Night Stalker for you. Boy, he's just a loony bin. Loony bin to the nth degree.
Yeah.
But
I'm thinking... Let's see. So for brutality, I gave him a 9. Mm-hmm. Again, I stick with, I say this almost every episode when I have to justify why they don't get a 10, is I think anytime, like when it comes to torturing people for a extended period of time, that's when they get 10s. I don't think that he was pretty quick to, I mean, he tortured them, but he killed them pretty quick. I'm talking about holding them for days, you know? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say brutality is a 9. Premeditation is a 7. I think that he went out like an animal and saw someone entering their house and was like, you. You know, I think he knew what he was going to do and probably had a plan when he was in there, you know, especially with how he wanted to kill them and all of that, which is why he gets a 7 for that. Motive, I'm giving him an 8 because, again, his motive is obviously to please himself, but he also robbed them. He had multiple motives, probably also to do Satan's work, inflict fear upon people. There were multiple motives, so I'm giving him a pretty high score on that. I'm giving him an 8. Difficulty of investigation, another 8. I said this early in the episode. His MO was like not having an MO, really which makes it very hard to investigate something like that. And then body count, I'm giving him a 9. And even though, yes, he was convicted of only 13 murders, I think there are more murders, but he imagined the amount of people he actually affected with the types of murders and multiple murders that he committed, and he left some people alive, which is, you know, he sexually assaulted them, beat them almost to death, left them alive. That, in my opinion, that's one tack on the body count.
Right.
I think there, you know, I definitely give him a 9 on that.
So we have fairly similar rankings. For brutality, I gave him a 9.5 because he picked the most brutal ways to hurt someone that you could imagine. And he oftentimes layered them. So not only was he electrocuting you, he was also stabbing you, or he was slashing you, or he was stomping you, or whatever it was. He would constantly see how far he could take the brutality, and then also add in the sexual assault aspect of it. And all of that is very gruesome, in my opinion. So I gave him a 9.5. Premeditation, we heavily differed.
Yeah, we really did.
I gave him a 3 because yes, because I don't think he really premeditated at all. I feel like he was just, it was very, you know, up in the air. He didn't like say, okay, on this night I'm going to go kill. It felt like very much so. He would just be driving and he's like, you know what I could go for? A nice slaying right now. And that's what he did. And that doesn't feel very premeditative, you know, to me at least. So I feel like there just wasn't enough. Like, it wasn't like he was picking certain women because he liked the way they looked, or he, as far as we can tell, at least. He wasn't picking children because he enjoyed harming children. He wasn't picking men because it made him feel stronger because he could take down a grown man. Things like that. It was solely whatever he felt like in the spur of the moment. And
I definitely hear you on that. I just think that he probably put a little bit more thought into how he was going to do it, and how he was going to make his exit before, like, beginning the crime.
I guess, but at the same time, things went awry pretty often for him.
Yeah,
you know?
No, they did. They sure did.
You know, I gave him a higher ranking on motive because I do think he was a little bit more on the side of like versus premeditation on motive. He was more, you know, I want them to confess that they are swearing on Satan. I want, you know, make people, because that's a very uncomfortable thing for a lot of people, especially because, you know, there's a lot of very religious people out there on different faiths and whatnot, and making someone say that they swear on Satan, it puts them in a moral dilemma.
Probably if he saw like crucifixes on the wall or like, you know, Bibles on desks and stuff like that. Yeah.
And I think that is disturbing in itself too, because he knew he was going to, this is going to be some of the last moments for these people.
Yeah.
And imagine being an ultra religious person like that and having to say, I swear on Satan as your last words. Yeah. That's gnarly.
That is gnarly. And that's super gnarly.
You know, the Satanism thing I think is very clear. You know, the sexual gratification was very clear. Even the aspect of what we're theorizing, you know, of wanting in the beginning, you know, emulating his cousin was fairly clear in some ways, you know, of in that way. But difficulty of investigation, though, I give him a 5 because...
Really?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Because of the fact that I agree, being so sporadic with his way of going about things and, you know, where he was killing and all that jazz, it did make it very hard for investigators. But he made one of the worst mistakes I think any serial killer has ever made by wearing a shoe only one person in Los Angeles County owned in that size to every single crime scene.
I don't think he knew. I don't think he knew that.
So the thing is, don't wear rare shoes. Wear a
rare shoes.
Wear a pair of Converse.
Yeah.
Everybody has Converse. He could have worn so many different shoes, but he wore them to every single crime scene.
You're right.
How dumb of a serial killer can you be?
Okay.
And so I was like, I heavily have to knock that off because that is just.
I mean, you're kind of right.
You know,
you're kind of right. I'm gonna stick with my 8 just because of the different, just because he didn't stick to anything.
Sure.
And that's going to be one of the things you're going to do to absolutely throw the police off, no matter what, because they're looking to solve a puzzle, and if the puzzle pieces don't match, I mean, they're screwed.
Exactly.
But you're right.
And so with body count, I gave him a 9 as well, just because. And yes, like I reserve that 10 for those really severely prolific serial killers and people like that. Or mass killers. And so with him, though, I agreed with you in the way of, sure, his technical number of dead is lower, but he harmed in so many facets, whether it be sexual assault or they ended up living, but they could have died or they should have died.
Exactly.
That, in my mind, is still a body count because it might be even crueler to do those same things to people, but then they ended up dying.
Yep.
So that's...
No, I like it. So his average is a 7.45.
Yep. So there you go.
There you go. There you have it. So y'all go ahead and comment your totals, and we will add that into the average. So that 7.45 can change easily.
It very much so can.
Cool.
But yes, thank y'all so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed, make sure that you like and share the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also, if you have a different killer or crime that you would like us to rank on our scale, leave that comment down below.
Whoop, whoop.
But other than that, my name is Madison Timmons.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And don't forget, next time you're walking down the street, you might just be passing a perfect 10.